Hello and welcome to the India Hangout. About 2,000 crore approximately was spent in running the 2009 elections. This is between the Election Commission and what the political parties spent. That figure will go up to approximately 6,000 crore for 2014 Lok Sabha elections. That's the official number. The unofficial number, of course, is much higher, and there are many guesses and guesstimates for that. A lot of this is also going into media, leading for the first time to ask some very fundamental questions, not just because the amount of money is so large. Is media being manipulated? And that's the question we're putting to you and to our guests. Kumar Ketkar right here with me, former editor Maharashtra Times and many other newspapers. Also joining us is Paranjoy Guha Thakuta, who's been writing many articles on the subject and has also been advocating the issue very, very strongly. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Kumar, so this is one of those subjects that's not necessarily discussed out there in the open. Why is that?
Well, actually, when we say media manipulation, what essentially we are saying is manipulation by the media persons. Because without media persons, there is nothing like media manipulation. And media persons who are owned or employed or hired by the persons who actually own the agencies or own the companies. So, manipulation of the media persons, is it possible? Yes, absolutely possible. Is it possible on the entire scale? Certainly not. Because there will be media persons who will refuse to be manipulated. But in that case, they can be fired instead of hired. And therefore, media manipulation will be attempted. In fact, in this particular election, one has not only guess, one knows from the grapevines also and from actual facts that media is indeed being manipulated, but that does not mean that there are not media persons working within the system and fighting against that manipulation. Okay. So, while saluting those who are fighting against that manipulation, one must not forget that effort to manipulate is there. Whether the entire media can be actually manipulated and all media persons can be really enslaved is a different thing.
Fair enough. So, let's separate the organization and the individual. So, let's talk about organizations. Is it fair to say that the level of manipulation, thanks to various reasons, is the highest ever that at least you've seen?
Yes, highest ever.
At the organizational level?
Yes, because I have been covering elections from 1971 and at that time there was nothing like quote unquote media, there was only press and nobody used word media at that time. So, we find all this actually in 15-20 years that the media has grown. In 1996, there was no private television channel at all. So, effectively we are talking of last 1.5 decade.
Right.
And we have seen humongous and labyrinthine growth of this media and therefore, people have seen the influence with 24/7, something like 700 plus channels, and there is tremendous amount of financial networking in the media, influencing the media persons and trying to influence and allurements. Right. So, I think it is humongous and I think it is going on, but it is going on differently at different places.
Right. So, and I am going to ask you why and in a moment. Paranjoy, you focused on, among other things, the whole problem of paid news. Right, and there's already been one or rather 4 instances of paid news which have come up. 4 politicians were hauled up for having paid for coverage in various newspapers. They include Maharashtra candidates Milind Deora, Sanjay Nirupam of the Indian National Congress, and 2 others. So, of course, the penalty isn't much except that they have to pay the advertising rates and also add them to their election expenditure.
It's very interesting that at least two high profile political personalities, both belonging to the Indian National Congress, have been hauled up. And it's interesting their defense. They're saying it's too much of a hassle for us, to really prove that we haven't paid A, B, C, D. But okay, we'll go ahead. It's a small amount of money. The DAVP or the Director of Audiovisual Publicity, Advertising and Visual Publicity. So we'll pay the amount because this is within our expenditure limits that are being mandated by the Election Commission. But before I go to paid news, and there's a lot that can be said about paid, and let me make 2 points. The first thing, which is really very, very unique in these elections, is that the Bharatiya Janata Party, which has been in the principal opposition party for the last 10 years, seems to be spending much more on advertising than the party which has actually been in power over the last 10 years, which is the Indian National Congress, which has headed the 2 UPA coalitions which have been in power for the last 10 years. So, this to me is quite unique. I would have thought that the Congress has enough money to spend. And then if they are not spending the money, why are they not spending the money? Have they given up the fight? Are they going to wait for another day to spend the money? But what cannot be denied is that the BJP is spending huge amounts of money. I mean, it's not just the hoardings that stare at you around every street corner, not only the full page advertisements in newspapers, it's not only Mr. Modi on every other television channel saying that, what we want is minimum government and maximum governance, but all the whole paraphernalia that's gone into election propaganda, the holograms, the 3D stuff. I mean, that's truly unique. Also very unique is for the first time, and the BJP is better than everybody else, is they are providing live feeds of the different public meetings that are being addressed by Mr. Modi, and all the television channels, they're saving themselves the botheration of bringing their own cameras over there because they're getting the feed directly from one source. So that's also very, very unique.
Govindraj, is there a sense then that the parties are also trying to manage the medium because in some ways they don't trust the media to communicate or convey the way they would like it to be done? Obviously, technology allows all of this.
Sure. What Kumar Ketkar just now said, there is the media and there is the media. There are persons and there are media persons. Let me bring out a couple of interesting examples to your notice. I mean, Mr. Rajat Sharma, who has a background with the Bharatiya Janata Party. He was, as a student, a member of the Akhil Bharatiya Vidyarthi Parishad. The interview that he did of Mr. Modi in Aap Ki Adalat, many would consider that to be excessively deferential. Only goody questions were asked, no tough questions were asked. But what is very, very significant is that just soon after that interview was broadcast, a very, very senior media professional, Kamar Wahid Naqvi, Mr. Naqvi put in his papers. He was actually virtually the number 2 man in the editorial lineup in that channel. Now, why did Mr. Naqvi put in his papers? Now, he has kept quiet, but there is possibly more to it than meets the eye. And I must tell you, this is not just true of the BJP. And, this is also true of the Congress. I mean, if you see many of the interviews that Mr. Rahul Gandhi has granted, some of them were obviously given to journalists who are known to be somewhat sympathetic, and then therefore they wouldn't ask the really tough questions. And I must say, my old friend,
Govindraj, we are all, just to sort of quickly respond to that, or respond or counter that. See, we are all in the race for interviews. To some extent, we are forced to, because of the heightened level of competition, forced to, have some kind of pre-interview deal before we actually do it, or we say no to the interview, right? I mean, and that must be a tough proposition in this market.
Okay, so let me raise a few questions because I don't know the answers to the questions. The first person among the major channels who was granted an interview by Mr. Rahul Gandhi was my old friend, Mr. Arnab Goswami of Times Now. Now, I'm wondering, because I don't know the answer to this question, was there some sort of a tacit understanding that any question could be asked, but no question could be asked about Mr. Rahul Gandhi's brother-in-law? So, I mean, was there? I don't know the answer to the question. I mean, I'm just wondering because Arnab, who is otherwise known to be really feisty, he grills every politician, he doesn't spare anybody. I was a little surprised that not a single question was asked about Rahul Gandhi's brother-in-law.
So the question we are asking is really two. I mean, or rather one. We are asking, is there organizational manipulation or is there individual manipulation in these elections when we, in the larger context, really?
A bit of both, I would say. A bit of both. And
I'm not referring to one particular interview. I'm saying in general.
In general, there are owners and those who are controlling media organizations. They have certain political affiliations. They have certain political predilections. So why should you be surprised if those individuals who are in charge of media organizations, that their views are prevalent or are given greater prominence than views to the contrary? Now, this happens across the world. We want so long as you do it transparently, that's fine. In many countries across the world, the editors or the editorial writers say, okay, we think you should vote for A, or we think you should not vote for B. I mean, even in the case of Mr. Modi, there have been some international publications who've gone on record saying we don't think you should vote for Mr. Modi. But in India, we don't do it. It's not so much in your face. So even if a particular media organization, its owners, its editor managers have a certain political preference, that preference finds expression in not so obvious ways, in perhaps subtle ways. And one of the ways is that you give less space to the other viewpoint, to the contrary viewpoint.
Right. Okay, Paranja, hold your thought. Kumar, a couple of questions and comments have come in, and I'd like you to respond to them. First is Shama, who says, Modi in most of his interviews on TV has referred to his image being tarnished by news traders, quote unquote. Part of the manipulation, but what or who are these traders, and why no reaction from the media about them?
Well, there was reaction to this particular comment in the media, but the fact is, as the question is raising, that there are news traders. Let us not ignore them. But I want to bring that to your attention, that it is not only the owners or the employers. It is not only the chief editors and the editors. It is not only the main anchor persons, celebrity anchor persons like Arnav or Rajdeep or whoever you mentioned, but there are also a large, organizations, armies rather, of kind of sleeper cells at the sub-editor level, at the junior correspondent level, and these sleeper cells have been organized by RSS for quite long time, and so they are there. So they are ideologically.
You're saying this because you've seen them?
Yeah, I have seen them. I have worked with them. I have tried to stop that activity also. But that is not the point. Point is, those ideologically oriented sleeper cells do not need to be bought. They may not be paid also. They will work for the cause, what they consider to be the cause. And therefore, I think the sleeper cells to the owners, there is a big chain, and everybody tries to identify who is with whom. And therefore, Narendra Modi has created, not trusting his own RSS sleeper cells, a parallel army of 400,000. I am not quoting my number. I am telling you something which even Piyush Goyal is on record. 400,000 people are monitoring, working, spreading the message across the country. They are independent of RSS. They are parallel to RSS.
So do they? So the question is, are they manipulating media, or they have become?
No.
The
So
media
they have created a parallel organization, and this parallel organization knows whom to contact in which small time or big time newspaper or small time or big time channel. So there is a connectivity. Yes. So there is a connectivity with the existing media persons, with existing RSS or the Bajrang Dal or VHP, and then this new what we can call Modi Swayam Sevak Sangh, which is actually essentially an event management team hired, paid. They are all paid, unlike RSS. RSS man may be sacrificing, ideologically governed, whereas these 4 lakh people are paid.
So, some more comments and questions coming in. So, Shweta says, I think manipulation is more to do with big business owning much of media. Is that the main link?
That has been there. I mean, that has been globally there.
Increased?
That has been globally there. It is not something new that, it used to be called jute press, because actually it was owned by the jute managements and the jute owners, jute mill owners, that is. So R.K. Karanja used to call them jute press. And so the relationship between the owners and the content has been in debate. Perhaps many people may not recall, but in 1971, when Information Broadcasting Minister was Nandini Satpathy, she had said that we must create a new atmosphere by delinking the owners from the media, that is newspapers at that time, because there was no TV. So that delinking from the owners, the media, has been debate going on here and partly even across the world, and so it has been happening. So what the question, what she has said is absolutely right, but that is not the only media scene.
Correct. Paranjoy, the comment, I think manipulation is to do with more to do with big business owning much of media. Is something that you does that resonate with you?
Yes, it does. And let me first add
as opposed
a few
to a situation where it's manipulation was there without big business being there. I mean, that's really the contrast here.
Okay. No, so let me add a few points to what Kumar Ketkar has said. I not only agree with him, I just want to add that if you remember from the days of the first press commission and the second press commission, when Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, V.K. Krishna Menon, they would talk about the jute steel press. Why? Those days, the Sahu Jain family, which used to control the Coleman Company a little bit, they had interest in jute. They were in New Central jute mills. When you talk about the steel press, Ramnath Goenka made an unsuccessful attempt to acquire the Indian Iron and Steel Company. The Tata Group, which had interest in Tata Steel, the Tata Iron and Steel Company, also had interest in the Statesman of Kolkata. But you see, the idea was that as a media organization, that media organization would be used to promote the other business interests of the promoters or the groups. But things changed thereafter. Today we have a very, very different kind of a situation. Say if you look at the Bhaskar Group, having made substantial profits from the media, they have diversified into a host of other industries, into chemicals and fertilizers and mining and whatnot. I'll give you some examples. Mr. Mukesh Ambani's companies are major investors in the Network 18 group. Mr. Kumar Mangalam Birla is a major investor in the Living Media group. Mr. Abhay Oswal and his family members have investments in NDTV group and other television channels like Focus. Mr. Vijay Dar of the Lokmat group, he is a member of parliament belonging to the Congress. We know about his alleged involvement in so-called Colgate cases. But, things are a little more complicated than that. At one level, Dr. Chandan Mitra, my old school friend, he would be in the Pioneer. You would expect the Pioneer to put out the BJP point of view because he is a member of parliament belonging to the BJP. But sometimes it gets a little complicated because the owners of media, the media barons, have friends in all political parties. You could say Mrs. Shobna Bharatia's father, the late K.K. Birla, was a member of parliament belonging to the Congress. But Mrs. is also friendly with Mr. Arun Jaitley because she was present when he was campaigning.
I think
Amritsar.
Yeah, Govindraj, what you're saying is correct. But I think so many of these links, tenures or otherwise, have always existed. The question we are asking is there a sort of far more dramatic manifestation of those linkages leading to overt manipulation, which perhaps we've not seen before? That's really the question we're asking.
I'm not too sure about that. Maybe the corporatization of the Indian media has become a more sort of pervasive reality of the Indian media scape. Maybe that's why you're wondering whether the decisions are taken in the boardroom or the newsroom. But this is to some extent an international trend. It's not unique to across the world. The role of the editor vis-a-vis the owners, the managers have got diminished. And we are seeing the same thing happening in India. It happened earlier. We are continuing to see that, perhaps a little more so, I would say.
Okay. So, more questions. Kumar, let me throw this one to you. Yatish asks, is there anything different about the way the Congress and BJP manipulate the media?
Well, BJP is more efficient in manipulating the media. Okay. Congress would like to, but Congress is not as efficient as BJP is. Okay. And this time at least, I don't know from where, but the amount of money and resources that have gone into the BJP spread of the message. I mean, you need not be an accountant or a cost accountant, chartered accountant, anything. You just go and count the number of hoardings in Mumbai, Delhi or Bangalore, wherever. Just count the hoardings. Ask somebody, that company who owns the hoarding, what is the price you charge, and you just see how many days the hoarding has been there, and just calculate only on hoarding. Then you go to the newspapers, first page, second page, third page, jacket advertising, inside advertising, and ask the company, how much do you charge for this kind of a jacket? And just work out simple. Forget election commission and their limits. Just work out on simple paper. It is simple calculation. You don't need to have higher algebra for that, and you will come across a stunning kind of staggering amount that BJP is spending this time, and BJP believes that media can actually control the message. And because media can control the message, they are saying this. There is a book called Technology of Political Control. In Technology of Political Control, the book highlights how media can be actually controlled. But we have also seen how media management fails and people have something else in mind.
Right. So, okay, I've got several questions coming here. One is addressed to you. Shweta asks again, why aren't you talking about, that is you, Mr. Ketkar, talking about AAP, which is a creation of media, isn't it? And they would even stage their dharnas to make it to prime time. An issue which has been brought up earlier, to be fair.
Very interesting question, but AAP's presentation in the media was not paid. AP provided a completely different kind of politics, different kind of agitation, different kind of argument. And therefore, media found itself interesting. Frankly speaking, the so-called manipulators of the media would not like AAP to be presented at all, because AAP puts holes into their balloons. And therefore, AAP was not exactly a choice of the so-called manipulators of the media, but aap became a news. And you cannot say stop the news beyond a point. I mean, they would love to. Like so many news items they have stopped. I'll just give one example. Narendra Modi during Vibrant Days time announced that there is going to be a city, gift city. And that gift city was, 400 crores were spent on the survey. It was something like much better than Lavasa or something. And that was supposed to be the ideal city. This is about 7-8 years ago. Nothing has happened. And he's talking about 100 cities. No question has been asked by any interviewer from where the funds will come for these 100 cities when you have not been able to build the great city that you planned and announced it as a model called GIFT in Gujarat. You have not done anything. Nobody has asked this question.
But also because public memory is short.
No, public memory is not short. Public memory, we are...
You remember, maybe others don't.
Yeah, I mean, public memory is not actually short. Public memory is made to be short. Public memory is not served with the referential material that is required to be served to them. So I think public memory is not short. It is the memory of the journalist who is often quite short.
Okay. So here's a question again to you, and they're flowing very quickly. Are you confusing campaign spending with media manipulation?
Not at all. Campaign spending is not necessarily for media manipulation, but campaign spending can manipulate media. That's the point. But you cannot have an equation like I spend 1 crore rupees and thereby I manipulate opinions of about 1 lakh people. That equation cannot be made. However, the belief is, since the medium is the message in the new world and media is the message in the new world, the belief is that the more you actually harass the entire audience with constant harangue on the message, perhaps you will be persuaded. But they don't know, perhaps there is something called dissonance in the advertising industry. Overkill can create a backlash. And perhaps BJP will experience this time if they don't get, let us say 225 on their own to BJP, not NDA. If they don't get BJP 225 plus seats, they are saying 272, but even if 225 they don't get, that will be considered as waste of some 50,000 crore rupees which they have spent.
I'll come back to that figure in a moment. Poranjoy, question to you. This is from Yatish again. He says the conspiracy theory, that is your conspiracy theory is fine, but corporates across the world own media. Do they bend according to ideology as per revenue pressures? Question mark.
Firstly, I have no conspiracy theory I am propounding. I am stating facts. Of course, what Yatish is saying is 100% correct. I have no disagreement whatsoever. He who pays the piper calls the tune more often than not. So I have absolutely no disagreement. Obviously, the owners, the promoters, those who control the media, their views would prevail. Let me draw your attention to a very interesting article that Mr. Rajdeep Sardesai wrote in the first post today. And the title says, "Stop whining, Congress. AAP and Modi have crushed you in the media game." And it's interesting that Rajdeep thinks that the truth is both Narendra Modi and Arvind Kejriwal have simply used the modern media weaponry much better than their rivals. And that would possibly explain the kind of media coverage that both the Aam Aadmi Party and the Bharatiya Janata Party have got in recent times.
Right, but Poranjoy, I think the point that Kumar made, he's also saying that the manner in which the medium has been used and the sheer ferocity with which information is being pumped through the medium, which i.e. the media, obviously is at a level of proportion more than what we've ever seen and experienced.
I have absolutely no doubt about that. That's because the media has become so huge. I mean, do you remember that in 1991 we had one television broadcaster called Doordarshan? Today, the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting have given permission to something like 900 television channels. It's something like 300 television channels claim they are news and current affairs. The channels, though you and I may disagree that what is being shown on these channels is either news or current affairs. If Amitabh Bachchan has a headache, it becomes live breaking news. But look, it's not just television. I mean, look at the expansion of mobile telephony. Today, close to 7 out of 10 Indians have a mobile phone. In even way back in 2004, when Pramod Mahajan started using the mobile phone, and suddenly you'd get a phone and you'd hear a familiar voice, and you say, "Hello, this is Atal Bihari Vajpayee calling you to the phone." But that whole strategy backfired. Remember, India shining, Bharat Uday backfired. But today, there are more and more people who are using the internet, who are using mobile phones, watching television. So it's not surprising that the media is being used. The media is at one level influencing, has a great influence on the way, on the
Right.
political life of this country. And therefore, it's not surprising that politicians and political parties should also try
Right.
and use and manipulate the media.
Right. So, Kumar, what we are saying is that really we're looking at a blend of two different things, right? One is, of course, the television organizations and the newspaper organizations picking up on either clever strategy or new arrivals on the scene like the AAP. And the other is, of course, because it's so big and so powerful and so all-pervasive, the political parties starting to use it, not starting, actually, they've already used the media to some extent. So now let's spin a little forward now. I mean, the elections, of course, will get over and we'll have the results in May 16th. What do you see happening after that?
Well, actually, I find and I feel that the so-called imagined impact of the media, which BJP has calculated, will fall flat.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that they will not gain because of the media campaign. They will definitely gain because it has been such a huge exercise, humongous exercise. However, after all, I mean, let us be practical. If the media was so powerful with all the hoardings, press, TV, radio, mobile phones and WhatsApp and what have you, and 543 seats they should get. The fact that people who are not voting BJP are either A, defying the medium and the message, or they are influenced by other medium and other message, or they are influenced by their direct experience, which has nothing to do with the medium and
Right.
message.
Right.
So there are, people don't govern their life only by the media. They also govern it by the media. But their direct experience, their contacts, their caste, community level. I'm not saying caste in the traditional sense. I'm saying caste is a community.
Yeah.
And in that community, whatever is the communitarian experience of those people, that also dominates. Personal contact of the MLA or MP, that also makes an impact. If Congress really had their karyakartas, their activists, their MPs, MLAs and corporators actually working on the field and in connection and in dealing with the people, no
They wouldn't
media
have
could
had
have
to-
influence.
yeah,
The media operates only in that vacuum. The vacuum is created between the Congress activist or a BJP activist and the people. Now BJP realizes that its vacuum is much larger. Because BJP has not been connecting to all types of communities, all types of castes. So I think BJP is trying to fill the vacuum by
Right.
the 50,000 crore media campaign.
So where do you get that figure from?
I get this figure from, calculations.
Okay. So it's not a firm figure.
It's not a firm figure, it's very close.
Okay, fine. Paranjoy, what we are saying is what happens later. So Kumar says that basically this is going to fizzle in some ways because the voter is going to cock a snook at the parties and really tell them that in whatever way, that I mean by obviously voting differently, that all this was a waste of time and money. How do you see this?
I don't know whether it's a complete waste of money, but I do agree with what Kumar Ketkar has said. And let me give you a few examples to illustrate why he could turn out to be absolutely accurate. Miss Mayawati, she hardly, if ever, gives media interviews. When she addresses press conferences, she very rarely takes questions. I know because some years ago, more than 10 years ago, I once interviewed Miss Mayawati, and then somebody told me, how did you get an interview with her for 1 hour? I said, I was lucky I got it. He said, she hardly gives interviews. You take Mrs. Sonia Gandhi. How many interviews has she given? How many press conferences has she attended? Even Mr. Modi. Until very recently, until the last few weeks, Mr. Modi too would only give interviews to people he wanted to give interviews to. So the point that I'm making is that these politicians also realize that the media helps, but only up to a point. People of this country, the ordinary voter of this country, she is not a fool. Yes, she's getting bombarded by the media, but at the end of the day, when she or he makes up her or his mind, there are a number of issues they weigh. There are a number of considerations come in, of which this whole media, the media blitz, the media, the influence of the media. Sometimes we who are a part of the media, we tend to overestimate our own or the media's
Our own power and reach, as it were. Okay.
To influence people.
Right, Paranjoy. So let me get in two quick comments and then we close. One, Lakshmikant says, in this election, politicians have learned to use alternative media successfully. It's a comment. Yatish comes back and says the spends have always been there. It looks like the BJP has spent more on print while Congress has spent more on TV. BJP spins also seems to have spent more on the internet. The interesting question is, has the media changed its tune as per the spend, or have they changed it because they see a particular party coming to power? Kumar?
Well, I don't think media has unanimously decided sort of to bring BJP to power. I don't think media
some people feel that.
Yeah, some people feel that way. Media manipulation is there. That does not mean that all media is manipulated. Media spending is there. That does not mean that every single individual or voter is influenced by the media management. But the fact is that when there is a vacuum between the politician, active politician and a simple citizen, simple voter, in that gap media operates. And more the gap, more the power of the media.
Right.
Unfortunately for the UPA and the Congress, their direct reach out, personal, human touch with the voter was going down. And therefore there was a vacuum. BJP did not have that. BJP had it only through its RSS network, some kind of traditional belief systems and all that they had. But they did not have the kind of network which Congress had across from Kanyakumari to Kashmir. So that gap they had to fill by putting in this media campaign. But if Congress had simply networked with the people, given the human touch, you don't need media. Actually, just simple example, 28 seats that AAP got in Delhi, they did not spend money. They had a direct contact with people. So direct contact with people is far more influential than all the hoardings and the television interviews and so on and so forth.
And the aggressive internet campaigns. Well, thank you so much, Kumar. Thank you, Paranja. We've run out of time. The big question we were asking is media being manipulated, and to what extent? I think we've got some thoughts here, but the discussion, of course, will continue, not just for the elections 2014, but beyond. Thanks for watching the India Hangout.